How can we be short today if we have received an answer from the Rebbe?
I recently came across a story and I can't remember it. But the Teichen Asipa was that there was a Yid. Oh, I'll tell you what it was. They gave out the weekly My Story. So they had a story where a Yid whose name is Harav Alituv. That he came from a Sephardic home, from a Moroccan home, and he came to learn Temchat Mimim in the Rebbe's yeshiva in 1951 when the Rebbe first became a Rebbe. In the beginning, the Rebbe corresponded with him extensively, and at a certain point it became very difficult for the Rebbe to answer all of his letters. The Rebbe didn't have any time. So he decided to write less frequently because the Rebbe didn't have time. And he got a note from the Rebbe at one point where the Rebbe writes to him that he's disappointed that he discontinued to write. And the Rebbe says to him, the fact that I don't have time to answer doesn't mean I no longer have an interest. Continue to write to me like he did before. And he realized that even though the Rebbe wasn't necessarily answering his mail, the Rebbe was reading it. All of us who grew up in Lubavitch knew that when you wrote a letter to the Rebbe, unless you wrote about very specific things like a shidduch, 3 times out of 4, he would not answer. Very frequently the Rebbe didn't answer. All kinds of things. Even requests for the fuah. If you asked questions, you wouldn't always get an answer. And certainly if you asked for a bracha, or if you asked for a moifes, you didn't always get an answer. But a non-answer from the Rebbe was an answer on so many levels and in so many ways. There's the famous story with Zalman Duchman where he asked the Rebbe for a bracha for somebody, and he said to the Rebbe, I don't want to ask it al-atziyin. I don't want a generic answer. I want a personal answer. So the Rebbe answered him, ask it al-atziyin. And then the person for whom he asked recovered from his illness, and the Rebbe said, no, so ask al-atziyin is nothing. The point is, the Rebbe used to say to people, you put a letter in the mail, I got it. That's what the Rebbe used to say. You put a letter in the mail, I got it. And the impression that the Rebbe gave you was that he didn't get it when the mail arrived. He got it when you put the mail in the mailbox. Why? Because since there's a chazaka, and when you gave the letter to the mail carrier, even though the mail carrier may not be a Jew, and you have to wonder if the shlich is by goyim, and the Rebbe sort of ignored that aspect of the whole issue. Since there's a chazaka, that chazaka is a metzias and teina, and you sent the Rebbe a letter, the Rebbe received it. So, I understand the difference in people's feeling between before Gimel Tammuz and after Gimel Tammuz. But understand that before Gimel Tammuz, the fact was that very frequently, more than half the time, you wrote and didn't get an answer. There were occasions where the Rebbe wrote you an answer, and there were occasions where the Rebbe didn't write you an answer. But that the Rebbe got your letter, that he read your letter, and that even though the Rebbe was so incredibly busy, your letter got all the Rebbe's attention in such a way that there was a complete involvement of the Rebbe in your situation. That was deep and complete and without any deficiency. This was true. And therefore, that alone was an answer. That alone was being Mediyah the Rebbe was everything. And that continues to be true. As far as getting answers from the Rebbe now, so there are different approaches from different Hasidim. A lot of people put letters in Igros Kodesh. And sometimes they get answers, sometimes they don't get answers. I know people who get answers constantly from Igros Kodesh, and I know people who never get answers from Igros Kodesh. I think it's an incredible schus to get answers from Igros Kodesh. And I think I once said this before in one of these Q&As, that I think the Rebbe was meramez this in the beginning of the Nesius, when the Rebbe talked about this question regarding the Friedrich Rebbe. When people said to the Rebbe, how can you write to the Friedrich Rebbe? So the Rebbe used to say, du schreib, und der Rebbe wird gefunden a Weg wie zu entferen. You write, the Rebbe will find a way to answer. And he brought a raya from a pasuk in Tanakh. Vayove michtav mi Eliyahu, that a letter came from Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi was Eile B'Sara HaShamayim. Eliyahu went up to heaven, and then after he went up to heaven, there was a letter from Eliyahu. And of course, the way the story is explained, it was a letter from Elisha. Elisha wrote down a message from Eliyahu Hanavi. So, I think that the fact that it's become customary by Hasidim to put letters in Igros Kodesh is something that the Rebbe sort of hinted to, the idea of michtav, a letter, Eliyahu. But I'm not saying you should necessarily put a letter in Igros Kodesh. Everybody has their own hergish. Everybody has their own relationship with the Rebbe, and it's a davar pnimi. It's a very deep thing. Some people don't look for answers at all. The Rebbe used to say, and he continues to say, du schreib, you write, the Rebbe will give him a weg bitte entferen. He'll find a way to answer. That the Rebbe received the letter is no question. And that he's being made a Rachman Rabban for us is no question. That his neshama is connected to our neshama, and as a result, we're closer to the Eibishter and to the Emes, is no question. In terms of having to resolve the difficulties in our lives, the Rebbe's expression is, the Eibishter will find a way to answer you. And it's conceivable that you can get it through a clarity. You just suddenly had a question, and you go to the oil, and now you have no question, you have a clarity. But above all else, there's what the Rebbe himself said in the Siches that he spoke. Yud Gimel Tishrei Tavshin Mem Ches, and then Tu B'Shvat Tavshin Mem Ches, and Motzei Shabbos Truma Tavshin Mem Ches, and then Chaf Aleph other Tavshin. The Rebbe said that when you have a question, you should consult people. Either you should consult 3 Hasidic Rabbonim, or Askonim, who are expert in the field where your question is, or Reifa Yedid, doctors who are expert, and of course it's a serious question. The Rebbe said, don't ask 1, you should ask 3. And the Rebbe made it very clear and plain that when you're doing this Heirah of the Rebbe and consulting people about how to ask, the answer is not coming from them, the answer is coming from the Rebbe. And I know stories of a young man who told me about himself that he had a very difficult situation, and he called a mashpia, and the mashpia said, do what the Rebbe said, get together 3 people, and when they give you an answer, that's going to be the Rebbe's answer, and the answer was al derech hapela. It was so. It was an answer from the Rebbe. But the most important thing is to appreciate the hiskashus, and to understand that hiskashus, it's not like before Gimel Tammuz, you got answers. It wasn't that way. You believe that the Rebbe is paying attention, and even though we had a fraction of a second, literally, for your note, you knew that fraction of a second was a lifetime of attention and attentiveness and awareness and concern, and in that there was also an answer. And they should be mezakas, we should see the Rebbe b'nei basar and have a different kind of circumstance. But